War is an algorithm. We will show its price. A tank crosses a field in 30 seconds. The soil compaction it creates lasts 20 years. The landmine it might leave behind lasts 50 years. The harvest lost from that field compounds annually. This is not battlefield damage. This is economic amputation. The numbers are stark. According to UN Mine Action Service, approximately 60 countries remain contaminated with landmines and unexploded ordnance. Total contaminated land area, over 700,000 square kilometers. This is larger than France. Most is agricultural land. The flat, accessible terrain where armies fight is the same terrain where farmers plant. Laos demonstrates the scale. Between 1964 and 1973, the United States dropped 270 million cluster bombs on Laos. Failure rate, 30%. Unexploded bomblets remaining, 80 million. Land area affected, 87,000 square kilometers, 1/3 of Laos territory. According to Lao National Unexploded Ordnance Program data, less than 2% has been cleared as of 2024. At current clearance rates, 2,000 to 3,000 square kilometers annually. Time to full clearance, 29 to 43 years. This assumes funding continues, no new conflicts occur, and clearance rate does not slow. The economic cost accumulates. According to World Bank assessment, contaminated land in Laos is effectively removed from productive use. Value of agricultural output per hectare in Laos, $400, $800 annually. Land contaminated, 8.7 million hectares. Annual agricultural production lost, $348 to $696 billion, compounded since 1973. Over $150 billion in lost agricultural output. Laos's entire GDP in 2023, $14 billion. The unexploded bombs cost Laos more than 10 times its annual economic output, and they remain for decades more. But lost production is only direct cost. According to casualty data compiled by mines advisory groups, Laos averages 5,100 casualties annually from unexploded ordnance. Since 1973, over 20,000 casualties. Most are farmers hitting ordnance during cultivation. Medical costs per casualty, $5,000 to $20,000. Lost productivity from death or disability, $50,000 to $100,000 per person over lifetime. Total economic impact, $1 to $4 billion. This is separate from lost agricultural output. These are destroyed lives. The clearance cost reveals the asymmetry. According to humanitarian demining organizations, cost to clear 1 square meter of contaminated land, $3 to $10 depending on terrain and ordnance density. Laos needs to clear 87 billion square meters. Total clearance cost, $261.870 billion. The bombs cost perhaps $5 billion to drop in 1964-1973. The cleanup costs 170 times more. And the cleanup has been ongoing for 50 years with no end projected. They said, strategic bombing will destroy enemy logistics. They got strategic destruction of agricultural capacity for 3 generations. Ukraine provides current data. According to Ukrainian government estimates, approximately 174,000 square kilometers are potentially contaminated with mines and unexploded ordnance as of late 2024. This is 30% of Ukraine's territory. Agricultural land contaminated, approximately 100,000 120,000 square kilometers. Ukraine is one of world's top grain exporters. Agricultural output value from contaminated areas, $15 to $20 billion annually pre-war. This production is now suspended or severely reduced. The demining timeline is sobering. According to international demining experts, clearing 174,000 square kilometers will require $30–50 billion and 10–15 years under optimal conditions, meaning massive international funding, thousands of trained deminers, and no new contamination. Current demining capacity in Ukraine, approximately 2,500 square kilometers annually. At this rate, 116 years to complete. Scaling up demining operations requires training, equipment, and coordination. Realistically, 20-30 years minimum, even with maximum effort. During those decades, the agricultural output is lost. $15 to $20 billion annually, x 20 years, renders $300–400 billion in cumulative agricultural production lost. This assumes no inflation, no compound effects, no permanent soil degradation. All optimistic assumptions. Real cost will be higher. The soil degradation compounds the timeline. According to agricultural science research, heavy military vehicle traffic compacts soil to depths of 50–100 centimeters. Compacted soil reduces crop yields by 20–50% for 10–20 years, even after demining. Ukraine's contaminated agricultural land sustained 2 years of heavy military traffic. Tanks, artillery tractors, supply trucks. Even after mines are cleared, yields will be suppressed for a decade minimum. Additional lost production, 20–50% of 15 to 20 billion. 3 to 10 billion annually for 10 years. 30–100 billion. Chemical contamination adds another layer. According to environmental studies from Iraq and Afghanistan, military operations contaminate soil with heavy metals, lead, mercury, depleted uranium, explosive residues, and fuel products. These persist for decades. In Iraq, soil contamination near military sites showed elevated toxicity 20 years after conflict. Agricultural use of such land produces crops with heavy metal accumulation unsafe for consumption. Remediation cost $50,000 to $200,000 per hectare for serious contamination. Ukraine has thousands of hectares of intense combat zones. Cleanup cost, potentially billions. Syria shows the irrigation dimension. According to UN Food and Agriculture Organization assessments, Syria's irrigation infrastructure suffered $1.8 billion in direct damage from 2011–2020. This is pumping stations, canals, wells, distribution networks. Syria's agriculture depended heavily on irrigation. 60% of agricultural output came from irrigated land. Without functioning irrigation, production collapsed. According to FAO data, Syria's agricultural output declined 40% from 2011–2020. Lost agricultural GDP, $16 billion cumulatively. Rebuilding irrigation infrastructure requires not just money, but time. A pumping station takes 2 to 3 years to design, procure, and install. Canal systems require 3 to 5 years to rehabilitate. Syria has hundreds of damaged irrigation sites. Sequential reconstruction, even with unlimited funding, 15 to 20 years. Parallel reconstruction requires coordination, expertise, and security, all lacking. Realistic timeline, 25 to 30 years to restore pre-war irrigation capacity. During restoration, agricultural capacity remains suppressed. Syria went from food self-sufficient to importing 50% of food needs. Food import costs $2 to $3 billion annually versus 500 million to $1 billion pre-war. Additional annual cost $1 to $2 billion. Over 30-year reconstruction period, $30–60 billion in excess food import costs. This is pure loss. Money spent feeding population that could have been fed by domestic production if infrastructure remained intact. They said, military objectives justify infrastructure damage. They got permanent food import dependency and generational agricultural decline. Yemen demonstrates the water crisis multiplication. According to World Bank data, Yemen's agriculture consumed 90% of water resources pre-war. The conflict destroyed water infrastructure while disrupting fuel supplies needed for pumping. According to UN assessments, agricultural water availability declined 40% in some regions. Crops failed. Farmers abandoned land. By 2023, Yemen imported 90% of food versus 80% pre-war. Population, 30 million. Additional food import cost, approximately 500 million $1 billion annually. But water scarcity has compounding effects. Without irrigation, topsoil erosion accelerates in Yemen's arid climate. According to environmental assessments, some abandoned agricultural land is experiencing desertification, permanent conversion to non-arable desert. Once desertified, land requires 100 years to naturally regenerate, if ever. Artificial regeneration through soil improvement, $20,000, $50,000 per hectare. Yemen has hundreds of thousands of hectares at risk. The land itself is dying. The livestock sector reveals cascading failures. According to FAO estimates, Syria's livestock population declined 50% from 2011-2020. Sheep and goat population, 21 million to 10 million. These animals were capital assets for farmers. Average value per animal, $100, $200, lost livestock value, $1.1 to $2.2 billion. But livestock is productive capital. It generates offspring, milk, meat annually. Lost annual production from missing livestock, $500 million, $1 billion. Compounded over 13 years, $6.5 to $13 billion. Restocking requires time. A sheep reaches reproductive maturity at 12-18 months. Building flock from reduced base to pre-war level. 8 to 12 years minimum assuming fodder, veterinary care, and markets exist. None are guaranteed in post-conflict environment. Realistic timeline, 15 to 20 years. During this period, rural incomes remain suppressed. Protein availability remains low. Agricultural economy remains depressed. Afghanistan shows the perennial crop dimension. According to agricultural assessments, Afghanistan lost approximately 40% of fruit tree orchards from 2001-2020 due to combat damage, water scarcity, and neglect. Fruit trees take 5 to 15 years to reach full production, depending on species. An established orchard represents decades of investment. Once destroyed, replacement requires another decade plus of zero production before return to previous output. The economic loss is generational. Afghanistan's pomegranate orchards were globally significant export product. Annual export value pre-war, 150-200 million. Post-conflict, 30-50 million. Lost export income, $100-150 million annually. This is permanent until orchards regenerate, meaning 2030s at earliest for trees planted in 2020s. 20 years of lost export income, $2 to $3 billion. For an economy the size of Afghanistan's $14 billion GDP, this is significant. The seed bank dimension is rarely calculated. According to agricultural researchers, conflicts destroy local seed varieties adapted to specific conditions over centuries. Syria's ancient wheat varieties, Afghanistan's fruit tree genetics, Iraq's date palm varieties, many lost when farms were abandoned or destroyed. According to botanical assessments, Syria lost an estimated 10 to 15% of traditional agricultural genetic diversity. This cannot be valued precisely, but agricultural economists estimate genetic crop diversity at $50,000 to $200,000 per unique variety for research and breeding potential. Lost varieties, potentially hundreds. Lost genetic value, tens of millions minimum. Replacement is impossible. These varieties resulted from centuries of natural selection and farmer cultivation. Once extinct, they are gone. Modern varieties may be more productive, but lack drought tolerance, disease resistance, or climate adaptation of traditional varieties. In changing climate, this lost diversity may prove critically valuable and irretrievable. They said, wars are temporary disruptions to agriculture. They got permanent loss of genetic diversity, decades of suppressed production, and generational food insecurity. The labor force dimension completes the picture. According to demographic data, agricultural workers are predominantly young males age 18 to 45, the same demographic most affected by conflict casualties and displacement. Syria lost approximately 1.5 million agricultural workers to casualties, emigration, and displacement, according to FAO estimates. These were experienced farmers with generational knowledge of local conditions. Replacing agricultural knowledge requires time. A farmer gains expertise over 20 to 30 years, learning soil conditions, water management, crop timing, pest control specific to local environment. This knowledge is not easily transmitted or replaced. With 1.5 million experienced farmers gone, Syria lost 45 million person-years of agricultural expertise. The economic value of this expertise, incalculable but substantial. The final calculation spans generations. Agricultural land contaminated in 2022 remains contaminated in 2050. Irrigation infrastructure destroyed in 2015 remains destroyed in 2040. Fruit orchards damaged in 2011 do not recover until 2030. Soil compaction from 2023 suppresses yields until 2040. Lost genetic varieties never return. A tank crosses a field in 30 seconds. The economic damage from that crossing accumulates for 50 years. The harvest not planted in 2023 is not harvested in 2024. The harvest not planted in 2024 is not harvested in 2025. 50 years of lost harvests from one conflict. The compounding is exponential. We counted the destroyed tractors. We did not count the 50 years of food those tractors would have produced. We did not count the soil fertility lost forever. We did not count the farmers who will never return. We did not count the children who will grow up malnourished because the fields are mined. The bomb costs $20,000. The minefield it creates costs $10 million to clear. The food production lost while clearing? Billions.